The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing quarterly reports for my hospitality portfolio. Victoria Sterling, Manhattan's most exclusive wedding planner, was on the line, her voice carrying that practiced sympathy reserved for delivering uncomfortable news. "Ms. Martinez, I'm calling about your sister Amanda's wedding. I'm afraid there's been a situation regarding your participation as a bridesmaid." I set down my pen and leaned back in my leather chair, looking out at the Manhattan skyline from my corner office. "What kind of situation, Victoria?" "Well, your parents contacted me this morning. They explained that you might not be able to attend because of financial constraints. They mentioned you couldn't afford the bridesmaid dress, which is $500, and they didn't want you to feel embarrassed." The words hung in the air like a slap. I'd been expecting something like this ever since Amanda announced her engagement 6 months ago. My family had perfected the art of exclusion disguised as protection. "I see," I said calmly. "And what exactly did my parents suggest?" Victoria's discomfort was palpable through the phone. "They asked me to call and explain that it would be perfectly understandable if you couldn't make it. They said you're going through a difficult time financially and they don't want to put pressure on you." I almost laughed. A difficult time financially. If only they knew that the struggling artist they pitted had built a $3.2 billion hospitality empire while they thought I was barely making rent in my tiny studio apartment. "Victoria, tell my parents I'll think about it and get back to them," I said. "Thank you for calling." After hanging up, I sat in silence for a moment, processing the familiar sting of being dismissed by my own family. They'd been doing this for years, making decisions about my life based on assumptions they'd never bothered to verify. To them, I was still Elena, the dreamy 22-year-old who dropped out of business school to pursue art. They had no idea that my art had evolved into acquiring and transforming luxury properties across 3 continents. While they saw failure, I'd been building an empire, one carefully chosen investment at a time. The irony was delicious. Amanda's dream wedding was being held at Grandview Estate, the crown jewel of Westchester County's event venues. What my family didn't know was that I'd purchased the property 2 years ago through one of my subsidiary companies, Sterling Hospitality Group. They'd been planning their perfect wedding at my venue, bad-mouthing my financial situation to my own employee. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Amanda's number. My sister and I had once been close, but that changed when she married into the Patterson family and absorbed their values about success, image, and worth. She'd slowly joined my parents in treating me like the family disappointment. Instead of calling Amanda, I decided to wait. Tomorrow was Wednesday, exactly 1 week before the wedding. If I was going to make my move, timing would be everything. That evening, I sat in my penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, a glass of wine in hand, thinking about how we'd gotten here. Growing up, my parents had always favored Amanda. She was the perfect daughter, law degree from Columbia, married to a successful investment banker, living in the right neighborhood, saying the right things. I was the wild card, the one who asked too many questions and refused to follow the predetermined path. When I dropped out of business school to pursue art, they were devastated. When I moved into a tiny studio apartment in Brooklyn and started selling paintings at local markets, they were ashamed. What they didn't see was that I was learning, watching, and quietly acquiring properties that everyone else overlooked. My first purchase was a rundown bed and breakfast in the Catskills. The owners were desperate to sell and I got it for $180,000. I spent 6 months renovating it myself, learning construction, design, and hospitality management. When I reopened it as an upscale retreat, bookings exploded. The profit from that sale funded my next purchase and then the next. While my family pitted my struggling artist lifestyle, I was building relationships with property developers, learning about markets and identifying opportunities. I kept my real life hidden, partly for privacy, but mostly because I'd grown tired of having to prove myself to people who'd already decided I was a failure. The next morning, I arrived at my office early and called Victoria directly. "Victoria, it's Elena Martinez. I wanted to follow up on yesterday's conversation." "Of course, Elena. Have you made a decision about Amanda's wedding?" "I have. I'll definitely be attending. In fact, I'd like to make a few adjustments to the arrangements." "Oh, wonderful. I'll let your parents know you've sorted out the dress situation. What kind of adjustments did you have in mind?" I smiled, looking out at the city below. "Nothing major. I just want to ensure everything runs perfectly." After all, it's going to be a very memorable day for everyone involved. Absolutely. Grandview Estate is our premier location. The Patterson family spared no expense. The total cost is approaching $400,000. $400,000. That was more than most people made in 5 years. Yet my parents had convinced themselves I couldn't afford a $500 dress. Victoria, I need to ask you something. As Amanda's sister, I'd like to contribute something special to the wedding. Could you set up a meeting for me with the venue management? I have some ideas for additional touches that might make the day even more special. That's so thoughtful of you, Elena. I'll arrange a meeting with the estate manager for this afternoon. They're always open to enhancing their events. Perfect. And Victoria, let's keep this between us for now. I want it to be a surprise. After ending the call, I called my assistant Sarah into my office. She'd been with me for 3 years and was one of the few people who knew the full scope of my business operations. Sarah, I need you to prepare a comprehensive report on Grandview Estate. Financial records, staffing, upcoming events, everything. Also, compile a guest list for Amanda Martinez's wedding this Saturday. Sarah raised an eyebrow. The Martinez wedding, isn't that your sister? It is. And it's time my family learned a few things about the business world. By noon, Sarah had delivered a thick folder containing everything I needed to know about Saturday's event. The guest list read like a who's who of New York society. Politicians, business leaders, old money families. My parents had been planning this wedding for months, treating it as their chance to showcase their success and social connections. At 2 p.m., I arrived at Grandview Estate for my meeting with the venue management. The estate was even more beautiful than I remembered from my last visit. Rolling hills, manicured gardens, and a stunning mansion that had been converted into the perfect event space. I'd purchased it because I recognized its potential, but standing here now I felt proud of what my team had accomplished. Marcus Webb, the estate manager, greeted me in the main foyer. He was a distinguished man in his 50s who'd been running high-end events for decades. Ms. Martinez, Victoria Sterling said you wanted to discuss some additions for Saturday's wedding. I have to say, everything is already planned to perfection, but we're always happy to accommodate special requests. Marcus, I appreciate you meeting with me on short notice. I wanted to discuss a few things about Saturday's event, but first I think there's something you should know. I handed him my business card, the one with my full title. Elena Martinez, CEO, Sterling Hospitality Group. Marcus's eyes widened as recognition dawned. You're the owner. I am. And Saturday's wedding is for my sister Amanda. My family doesn't know about my connection to this place, and I'd like to keep it that way until the right moment. Marcus nodded slowly, understanding the delicate situation. How can we help make this wedding memorable for the right reasons? I want everything to proceed exactly as planned until the reception dinner. Then I'd like to make a small announcement. Nothing dramatic, just a toast that might surprise a few people. Of course. And might I say, it's an honor to host your family's celebration. Your vision for this estate has been remarkable. Thank you, Marcus. There's one more thing. I understand my parents have been concerned about my financial situation. They've told several vendors that I can't afford certain aspects of the wedding. I'd like to address that. What would you like us to do? Nothing yet. Just be prepared for some interesting reactions on Saturday. Friday arrived with the typical pre-wedding chaos. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from family members, none of whom had bothered to contact me directly about the dress situation. Instead, I heard through cousins and aunts that my parents were handling the Elena situation, and that everything would work out fine. My mother finally called Friday evening, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she thought she was being generous. Elena, sweetheart, Amanda's wedding is tomorrow and we wanted to make sure you felt included. Victoria mentioned you were having trouble with the bridesmaid dress. Hi, Mom. Yes, Victoria called. Thank you for thinking of me. Well, your father and I discussed it and we decided to cover the cost of the dress. We don't want you to miss Amanda's special day because of money. The condescension in her voice was breathtaking. They were offering to pay $500 for a dress so I could attend a wedding at a venue I owned. That's very kind of you, Mom, but I've already handled the dress situation. Oh, good. I'm glad you worked something out. We'll see you at the church tomorrow morning. The ceremony starts at 2 p.m., and then we'll all go to Grandview Estate for the reception. I'll be there, Mom. Wouldn't miss it. Saturday morning dawned crisp and clear. Perfect weather for a wedding. I spent the morning getting ready in my penthouse, choosing my outfit carefully. The bridesmaid dress was hanging in my closet, a beautiful silk creation that cost exactly $500. I'd had it altered perfectly and it looked stunning, but I wouldn't be wearing it. Instead, I selected a custom-made dress from a designer my family would recognize, elegant, sophisticated, and probably worth more than most people's cars. I wasn't trying to upstage the bride, but I was done hiding who I'd become. The ceremony at St. Patrick's Cathedral was beautiful. Amanda looked radiant, and despite everything, I felt genuinely happy for her. Whatever issues we had as a family, she deserved a perfect wedding day. My parents barely acknowledged me during the ceremony, though I caught my mother glancing at my dress with confusion. They'd been expecting their struggling daughter to show up in something modest and apologetic. Instead, I looked like I belonged among the Manhattan elite filling the cathedral. After the ceremony, the wedding party and guests made their way to Grandview Estate. I rode alone, taking the scenic route through Westchester County, giving myself time to prepare for what was coming. The estate looked magnificent. My staff had outdone themselves with the decorations and everything was perfect. Guests were already mingling on the terrace, champagne glasses in hand, admiring the view of the Hudson Valley. I found Victoria near the main entrance, coordinating with the catering staff. She looked up as I approached and I saw surprise flash across her face. "Elena, you look absolutely stunning. That dress is incredible." "Thank you, Victoria. Everything looks perfect. You've done an amazing job. I have to ask, where did you get that dress? It's clearly designer." And after the conversation about the bridesmaid dress, I smiled. "Victoria, there are a few things about me that might surprise people today. But let's wait until dinner for the full story." The cocktail hour proceeded beautifully. I mingled with guests, many of whom I recognized from business circles, though they didn't know my connection to the venue. My parents worked the crowd like seasoned politicians, introducing Amanda and her new husband to anyone who might be useful for their social climbing. I overheard my mother talking to Mrs. Patterson, Amanda's new mother-in-law, near the bar. "We're so proud of both our daughters," my mother was saying. "Amanda's doing so well with her law practice and Elena is, well, she's finding her way. Art is such a difficult field." Mrs. Patterson nodded sympathetically. "It must be challenging to have children on such different paths. But I'm sure Elena will figure things out eventually." "Oh, we hope so. She's very talented, just not very practical. We actually had to help her with the bridesmaid dress. She couldn't afford it." I sipped my champagne and smiled. In 30 minutes we'd be sitting down for dinner and I'd have my moment. As the sun began to set, Marcus appeared at my side. "Ms. Martinez, we're ready to transition to dinner service. Would you like us to proceed with the seating arrangements as planned?" "Yes, but I'd like to make one small change. Instead of the traditional toasts from the father of the bride and best man, I'd like to add one more speaker to the program." "Of course. When would you like to speak?" "After my father's toast, before dessert is served. That should give everyone time to settle in." Marcus nodded and disappeared to coordinate with his staff. I made my way to the dining room, a stunning space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens. The tables were set with crystal and silver, and candles created a warm, romantic atmosphere. I found my assigned seat at table 6. Not the family table, of course. That honor was reserved for the Pattersons and my parents' closest friends. I was placed with some family acquaintances and distant relatives, people who barely knew me but had heard the stories about the disappointing daughter. As dinner was served, conversation flowed around the table. The usual wedding topics: how beautiful the bride looked, how expensive everything must be, how lucky the families were to afford such a lavish celebration. "This venue must cost a fortune," said my cousin Rebecca, gesturing around the room. "I heard they charge $50,000 just for the space rental." Actually, it was $75,000, but I didn't correct her. "Elena, how are you doing these days?" asked Mrs. Chin, an old family friend. "Your mother mentioned you're still working on your art?" "I'm doing very well, thank you. My work keeps me busy." "That's wonderful, dear. It's so important to pursue your passions even if they're not, well, practical." Before I could respond, my father stood up at the head table, champagne glass in hand. The room gradually quieted as he prepared to give his traditional father of the bride toast. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here today to celebrate Amanda and Michael's union. As Amanda's father, I couldn't be prouder of the woman she's become. She's accomplished everything we could have hoped for: a successful career, a wonderful husband, and a bright future ahead. He paused, his eyes scanning the room. Of course, every family has its challenges. We have 2 daughters, and while we're celebrating Amanda's success today, we continue to hope and pray that our other daughter will find her way to the same kind of stability and achievement. The words hit like a physical blow. Even at Amanda's wedding, even in this moment of celebration, he couldn't resist taking a shot at me. Around the room, I saw people glancing in my direction with pity and embarrassment. My father continued, oblivious to the damage he was causing. But today is about Amanda, and we couldn't be happier. To Amanda and Michael. The room raised their glasses and toasted, but I could see the discomfort on many faces. My father had just publicly humiliated his own daughter at a family wedding. As the applause died down, Marcus appeared beside the head table and whispered something to the wedding coordinator. A moment later, she stood up. Ladies and gentlemen, we have one more toast this evening. Elena Martinez would like to say a few words. The room fell silent. I could see confusion on my parents' faces, and Amanda looked surprised but pleased. I stood up slowly, smoothing my dress, and walked to the front of the room. Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate Amanda and Michael. Before I begin, I want to say how beautiful my sister looks and how happy I am for both of them. I paused, looking around the room at the faces staring back at me. Some curious, some sympathetic, some uncomfortable after my father's speech. My father just spoke about family challenges and finding one's way to success. I think it's interesting how we define success and how assumptions can shape our understanding of the people closest to us. My mother was frowning now, clearly wondering where this was going. For the past several years, my family has worried about my financial situation. They've been concerned that I'm struggling, that I can't afford things like a $500 bridesmaid dress. In fact, they've been so worried that they've taken it upon themselves to explain my situation to others. A murmur rippled through the room. My father's face was reddening. I appreciate their concern, I really do. Comes from a place of love. But I think there's been a misunderstanding that needs to be cleared up. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder of documents. You see, while my family thought I was struggling to make ends meet as an artist, I was actually building something else entirely. I started with a small bed and breakfast in the Catskills, then expanded into luxury hospitality properties across the country. The room was completely silent now. Today, I'm the CEO of Sterling Hospitality Group, which owns and operates luxury hotels, resorts, and event venues throughout North America and Europe. Our annual revenue last year was $2.8 billion. Gasps echoed around the room. I saw my mother's champagne glass slip from her hand. But here's the really interesting part, I continued, my voice steady and calm. This beautiful venue where we're celebrating tonight, Grandview Estate, is actually one of my properties. I purchased it 2 years ago and spent $8 million renovating it into what you see today. The silence was deafening. My father looked like he was going to be sick. So when my parents told the wedding planner that I couldn't afford to attend my own sister's wedding because of a $500 dress, they were speaking about their daughter's financial situation at a venue that same daughter owns and operates. I smiled at the head table where my family sat frozen in shock. Amanda, Michael, I want this to be the perfect start to your marriage, so please consider tonight's reception my wedding gift to you. The entire cost, venue, catering, flowers, everything, is on me. The room erupted. Amanda burst into tears, though whether from joy or shock I couldn't tell. Michael stood up and started clapping, and soon the entire room was on their feet applauding. But I wasn't done. There's one more thing, I said, raising my hand for quiet. Mom, Dad, I know you've been worried about my financial stability. I want to put those concerns to rest. I pulled out another document from my folder. This is a deed to a house in Scottsdale, Arizona. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, a pool, and a beautiful view of the mountains. It's worth about $1.2 million, and as of today it's yours. Consider it a thank you for all those years of concern about my finances. My mother was openly crying now, and my father looked like he'd been hit by a truck. I love you both despite everything. I love Amanda and I love our family. But I think it's time we started having honest conversations instead of making assumptions about each other's lives. I raised my champagne glass. To Amanda and Michael and to family, all the complicated, messy, wonderful parts of it. The room exploded again with applause and cheers. As I walked back to my table, people stood to congratulate me, shake my hand and express their amazement. The energy in the room had completely transformed. Amanda appeared at my side, tears streaming down her face. Elena, I had no idea. I'm so sorry about everything. The way we treated you, the things we said. Amanda, this is your wedding day. Be happy. We'll have plenty of time to talk later. She hugged me tightly. I love you, sis. And thank you. This is incredible. Michael joined us, his face full of admiration and gratitude. Elena, I don't know what to say. This is the most generous thing anyone has ever done for us. Just be good to my sister, I said, smiling. That's all the thanks I need. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations, conversations and celebration. My parents eventually approached me, both looking shell-shocked and ashamed. Elena, my father began, his voice shaky. I don't know what to say. The things I said tonight, the way we've treated you. Dad, we all make mistakes. The important thing is that we learn from them. My mother took my hands in hers. Sweetheart, can you ever forgive us? We were so wrong about everything. Mom, you're forgiven. But I need you to understand something. Success isn't just about following traditional paths or meeting other people's expectations. It's about finding your own way and building something meaningful. We see that now, she said. We see that we never really saw you at all. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, I found myself standing on the terrace overlooking the gardens I'd spent months designing. The wedding had been perfect. Amanda was happy and my family finally knew the truth. Marcus appeared beside me with a final glass of champagne. Ms. Martinez, if I may say so, that was one of the most memorable toasts I've ever witnessed at this venue. Thank you, Marcus. I think it was time for some honesty. The staff has been talking. They're all incredibly proud to work for someone who handled that situation with such grace and generosity. I smiled, looking out at the peaceful gardens. You know what the funny thing is? I never intended to reveal everything tonight. I was planning to maybe mention my ownership of the venue quietly, just to make a point. But when my father gave that speech, sometimes the universe gives us the perfect moment to set the record straight. Exactly. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. Thank you for the most amazing wedding gift ever. But more than that, thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. I love you, big sister. I smiled and typed back, I love you too. See you at Sunday dinner. Her response came immediately, wouldn't miss it. And Elena? Next time you buy a venue, maybe give us a heads up. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. Sometimes the best revelations are the ones that bring families together instead of tearing them apart. As I walked to my car, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. Building a business empire had been challenging, but navigating family relationships had been far more complex. Tonight, finally, both parts of my life had come together. My phone rang as I reached my car. It was Victoria. Elena, I had to call. That was the most incredible evening I've ever planned. But I have to ask, did you really build a billion-dollar company while your family thought you were a struggling artist? It's complicated, Victoria. But yes, that's essentially what happened. How does someone hide that level of success? I smiled, starting my car and heading toward the city lights in the distance. Very carefully and with a lot of patience. But mostly you just wait for the right moment to tell the truth. As I drove home to my penthouse, I reflected on what had changed and what hadn't. I was still the same person who'd dropped out of business school to pursue a different path. I was still the daughter who disappointed her parents' expectations. But now, finally, my family knew the whole story. The best part wasn't the money or the success or even the shock on their faces. The best part was Amanda's text and my parents' genuine remorse, and the possibility that we could build something better together. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't proving you were right all along. Sometimes it's using your success to bring the people you love back together. Monday morning, I arrived at my office to find a dozen roses from Amanda and a handwritten note from my parents asking if we could have lunch to talk about starting over. My assistant Sarah was grinning when she handed me the messages. I take it the wedding went well? She asked. It did. Better than I expected, actually. And your family? I smiled, thinking about the long road ahead of rebuilding relationships and creating new understanding. They're learning. We all are. As I settled into my desk to start another day of running my empire, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The possibility that success and family didn't have to be mutually exclusive after all. The best part about building something from nothing isn't the money or the recognition. It's having the resources to lift up the people you love, even when they don't deserve it. Especially when they don't deserve it. That's what family really means.